Good morning, everyone. Welcome to episode 27 of the Broadview podcast. On today's episode, we're going to talk about this Joe Budden drama.
And sometimes I gotta, and sometimes I gotta, and sometimes I gotta,
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to episode 27. We're going to talk about Joe Budden here. Joe Budden, if you know, someone who I relate to, unfortunately. Not one of the prouder things that I relate to, but is someone who I am very much like in a lot of different ways, although he is a Virgo. I'm not a Virgo. I'm a Sagittarius. So that means I'm the best. I'm the realist. Anyway, that's not the point. We're going to talk about some of these developments, if you didn't know, essentially there over the last month. And listen, first and foremost, it's not in my nature to talk about stuff like this, but I have thoughts on it from a deeper perspective, maybe. We'll see. Even though, I'm not beyond making fun of Tory Lanez, for example, which, fuck him. And it seems like people forgot that he shot a woman in the foot because whatever. We have short attention spans, if you catch my drift. Anyway, so if you didn't know, yesterday he had put out an episode yesterday essentially firing Rory on air. And they had been, apparently there's been tension in the podcast over the last few months. And yesterday I ended up caught in this YouTube rabbit hole listening to older episodes, even though generally, to be honest, I didn't listen to the Joe Budden podcast much. I would listen to kind of like some stuff, some of his perspectives on certain things, especially if it was hip hop, but a lot of hip hop stuff I would listen to. I never ever went to any of their opinions for sports, especially not basketball. And, some stuff that I don't think is really important or I don't necessarily care about, some pop culture stuff, which maybe I should care about because, maybe I'd get more viewership. But, I always appreciated Joe Budden's perspective on some things. I always found Joe Budden to be a really complicated figure for all of it, for the assault allegations, the just all of this shit. Every year he's going viral for yelling at somebody or getting angry or whatever. So there had been the last episode I had listened to, I think, was maybe 4 months ago, and Joe Budden is really good at getting angry at people, which is why I find a kinship in him, because anytime you listen to my Sixers podcast, when we lose, those episodes always tend to be a little bit spicier, a little bit funnier, a little bit better, because me ranting in an angry way is always hilarious, right? And Joe Budden is the same way. When he rants out of anger or whatever, it's always entertaining. So the last episode I had watched, I think he was ranting about Charlemagne making comments about him and their decision making and because of the Spotify deal falling through. And I had listened to him also ranting about Spotify, and I think this gives me a really interesting perspective because that was the last episode I had listened to or watched. That was like 4 or 5 months ago. Everything seemed cool. It did always, over the last year, anytime I tuned in, it always seemed like Rory and Joe had some weird spiciness, but it wasn't. It just seemed like I didn't think it was anything more than that. But then later, when you find out that there's actual beef behind the scenes, you start realizing, oh, wait a minute, he was actually, the spiciness had a deeper root, right? So apparently, a few weeks ago, 2 weeks ago, they put out a podcast kind of clearing the air for the fans. And then yesterday, an episode goes up, essentially, that Joe ends up taking down, where he essentially on air fires Rory, and as these things say, he checks them all, which is weird to me that you would go on a public podcast and think that you're checking somebody, or it's not. It's real-ish, but is it though, right? And it's weird, right? Because when you watch when I watched that Spotify episode, because again, this is what gives me the weird perspective. If you were watching every episode, it's like anything. It's like anything in this world. When you're doing something, or like, let's say you're losing weight, right? Really hard to gauge your weight loss if you're looking at yourself in the mirror every single day, as opposed to somebody who saw you a month ago, sees you a month later, and is like, oh, wow, you've lost a lot of weight. And from your perspective, you're like, man, I can't tell, but this person saw me a month ago and he sees the extreme difference, or she sees the extreme difference. So it's different. So with this podcast is different. Listening to it 4 months ago, and they're talking about the Spotify deal, and Rory and Maul are all like, at times I always felt like they would, they were almost yes man for Joe. You know what I mean? And they always, in my opinion, they always did a good job shrouding it as just Joe was making sense. You know what I mean? I thought they did a good job doing that. But then when you think about how that was, and now today, it's as if that was all bullshit. It's all bullshit. And I think that's the problem. So when I'm like, the reason why I wanted to talk about this is because this brings up a really interesting question about a lot of different things, in my opinion, right? Like about what is reality in some of these things. It's different when you find out an artist behind his music, or an artist behind a television show, behind a movie, behind a stand-up comedy, right? Even the stand-up comedian problems, when you find out that you expect them to be, it's always surprising to find out how damaged a stand-up comedian is, right? The artist is, you almost expect it, but podcasting, while it is a creative, it's under, people don't understand that creating a podcast is an outlet, right? I am a creative person. So part of why I do podcasting is because it hits that creative part of me that allows me to kind of create something, put it out, and maybe it's not artsy fartsy. It's not this painting. It's not Monet cutting off his ear in a very toxic way and sending it to his ex-girlfriend. He probably, toxic, stalker. Hey, somebody please get a restraining order on this person. It's not anything like that, right? It's not the starry sky, but it's an outlet for me to express myself. You know what I mean? It's essentially what that is. And if you look at comedy like an art, which it is, it's an art form, podcasting is similar. While podcasting may not be as funny, you know what I mean? You may laugh on my podcast, but you may think on my podcast. It is that outlet, right? So, so when I think about that, right, when I come on my podcast because I have a real world perspective based on my real world, right? We all have our own real worlds. And if you feel like you're the main character of the world, it's because technically you are. Your world that exists in your own persona, right? Like that is, you are the main character of that world. No question about it. That's what makes life so intriguing and beautiful, right? Is every single person on this planet is their own main character. And it's really, really interesting to look at it from that perspective. So when you find out that these people who are doing this podcast based on this real life, it's surprising to find out that it's not real. You know what I mean? I think that's why you almost question reality, the reality of this that you're listening to. And the thing is I have a ton of thoughts here, because just from the actual logistics of what happened here, right? And it's funny watching people on, even me, commenting on this, even though I'm trying to be as objective as possible, watching people take sides on Twitter, either taking Joe's side or taking Rory and Mal's side. What's funny to me is that these people are all living vicariously through all of the individuals caught up in this situation, and are taking sides based on it when they don't know them. They don't know these people. And if you saw Maul or Rory or Joe on the street and say, hey man, you know what, I took your side in this beef, they'd look at you like you're fucking crazy. Who are you? Who even are you? Right? But we're living vicariously through these people. And it's like, so you're watching people who are like, well, they signed a contract. Well, Joe is the talent. Well, Joe is this. Let's dispel some of this shit. Right? Let's dispel some of this shit, because I can understand both perspectives, but I think that there is a moral side here, and I find myself agreeing with Maul, even though I've never even been a fan of Maul, to be real, because I always felt like Maul was, and all these people to a certain extent, like Maul thought that he was this ideal man, almost like, I am this ideal man. This is how you should be to be a man. And in some cases I would agree with some of his logic. In some cases I just thought that, especially when any of these dudes talk about women, everyone here has a toxic relationship with women, and it's really disturbing listening at all any of them talk about women. But when they talked about Tekashi 6ix9ine or something like that, right, you could relate and you'd be like, yeah, that's real shit. But even in those cases, a lot of the people if you are a Tekashi fan, you're living vicariously through Tekashi, and if you're a fan of them, you're living vicariously through it, saying that you know what, Tekashi's a lame, blah blah blah. But then if they were caught in the same situation Tekashi was caught in, they'd probably snitch, have done the exact same thing, right? So it's all nonsense. Um, but I agree with Maul here. You know what I mean? I actually do agree. I think he has the most measured response to a certain extent. You know what I mean? Like to sum it up, I mean, we don't know all the details. You know what I mean? So it's difficult. What I will say is every time Joe talks, he don't do himself favors. And if you watch the episode between those three, I had put this on Twitter yesterday that I understand what gaslighting it is. And for those who don't know what gaslighting is, the term gaslighting actually comes from an old movie from in the 20s or might have been in the 40s, an old movie where essentially this man was it's about this relationship where this man, and I don't know the purpose, I don't know the point of the story, but the man is trying to make the woman seem crazy. And what he's doing is adjusting this gaslight in her room to make it bigger, smaller. And she keeps asking, hey, are you messing with the light? And he would be like, what are you talking about? I'm not messing with the light. You know, are you okay? Are you crazy? Essentially making her feel crazy for shit he's doing. You know what I mean? That's what gaslighting is. And if you watch the episode, you learn that, oh shit, yeah, Joe Budden is gaslighting these people. He tells them, go on break, and then says, you left the show. Well, that's gaslighting. That's the type of gaslighting. You're making me seem crazy when we had the conversation that said we were going to go take a break. You know what I mean? And now from where I disagree with Joe during this conversation, where I disagree with Maul during this conversation, is Maul essentially felt like the show needed to stop, you know, while they were fixing this. Joe, I agree with him where he said, no, how? The show can't stop because there are people depending on this show, not even fans, but in terms of paychecks, people getting paid from this show, they need to work. The show can't stop. And I agree with that. I understand Maul's point, but I agree with Joe on that. I don't agree with Joe anything else after that, because so much of what we do in this country, sometimes there's a reason why this country leads the world in lawsuits, right? We are the most litigious society in the world. We will sue for fucking everything. We think that everything is beholden to a contract, and sure, yeah, I guess it is, but beyond that contract, is there human decency here? You know what I mean? And this is where I agree with Maul. Is there respect? Fuck that contract. And what's frustrating and what's disturbing, if you listen to this episode that got taken down, Joe is out here talking about, if you guys do a podcast, because they signed, I guess, a non-compete. If you do a podcast next year, I'm going to sue you. I'm going to sue y'all. I'm going to sue your whatever. And again, we don't know all the details, right? Apparently, they seem to had end things. After that, Rory was essentially went and said, hey, I want to audit the show because they want to know he wants to know where the expenses are going and blah, 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 blah. Joe took that personal. I don't know why you would take that personal. And because when you're on this show talking about friendship, you're acting like you want to separate feelings and business, friendship from business, but yet you keep bringing up feelings and friendship. And it's, which one is it? You're playing dumb fucking games. He brought up this Jay-Z story where he walked up to Jay-Z to ask him about, you know, to talk to him about his grievances towards Jay. And Jay, before Joe said anything, said, so what? And apparently at that point, Maul and Rory laughed. And he's apparently clearly been holding a grudge about this for 15 years. You know what I mean? Because the way he brings it up, he almost brings it up as an excuse for what he's doing now. Well, so what? So now I'm saying, so what to y'all? Y'all laughed at that. And now I'm saying, so what to y'all? So are you going to laugh at that? You know what I mean? It's almost like, and I know that because I am guilty of doing this exact thing. You hold a grudge about something that's completely unrelated, and then you argue with that person later and bring it up as if it makes any fucking sense. And it doesn't make any sense. That doesn't make sense. But where's the loyalty? Fuck that contract for a second. And there's a moment, the moment where I think Joe loses common sense or just doesn't make any fucking sense, right? That just ruins everything here. Is that Maul says at one point, Joe told Maul that they were talking about this comment that Joe had made to Maul, which was, this show is none of your business. And Maul felt some type of way about it because he's been They've been there for 7 years. They built this together. This is factual. Yeah, Joe is the namesake and he's the talent. There's no question about it. I'm not going to debate that. But they did build this show together. That triumvirate of people built this show together, and I'll talk about that in a second. But Maul says, he says the show's none of your business. Joe then says, well, I mean, Maul, what does it say in the contract? And Maul says, fuck that contract. Right now, some people will say, oh, well, see, you're not doing good business. Before we get to that, and we'll talk about why some people are bringing that up. But before we get to that, Joe says, fuck that contract, right? Business, Joe. Okay, but then Maul says, yeah, fuck that contract because you're talking to someone who doesn't give a fuck about contracts and I'm talking to someone who doesn't give a fuck about contracts. And Joe says, you're right, I don't give a fuck about contracts. Well, wait a minute. You don't give a fuck about contracts, but now you're threatening to sue them. Well, so now what is this game you're playing? This is petty. So because Rory wants an accounting of where the money is going, whether he's entitled or not. I couldn't tell you whether he's entitled or not. I don't know. You know what I mean? I don't know what ownership he has in here. And a lot of people were like, I mean, it's for Joe preaching ownership, but then fires them for wanting ownership. I think the point that Joe was making is that when these discussions were happening originally, they weren't talking about ownership. And when he asked them to elaborate their positions, they didn't take that opportunity then. They were treating it real friendship. And now when ownership is in question, it's too late. So I can understand that from a logical standpoint. But if these are your homies, that's a different story. That's a different fucking story. And I get it. Oh, this idea that's like, oh, well, that's why you don't do friends. Chill for 1 second. Just take your bullshit glasses of you who have never owned anything or done anything with anybody else. Take that off for 1 second. Right? Because at the root of this is a friendship. Is that important or not? And why is that important? I'm going to tell you why that's important. Because the brand of this show is kind of low-key built on that. That's really the problem with this show. The show is built on this brand that Joe, Rory, and Maul are three of the best friends or three like real close homies. And they've been through all types of shit together. And it's always love. And they got each other's back. And this is how you're supposed to conduct yourself as men and as homies and as friends. And then the shit comes out and y'all are taking sides. You're kind of missing the point. Of what that podcast was. At least the perspective I got from the few episodes I watched, that's how I felt. The dynamic of these three people is the dynamic of what you can only have with people that you are the three closest people you are to. You know what I mean? That's the dynamic you have. I think that the mistake here is that when you're talking about podcasting, the business of podcasting is something that's brand new. You know what I mean? This is a brand new thing. The business of podcasting is brand new. So when you're trying to do these things, I don't think anybody knows exactly what they're doing. So yeah, of course, there's going to be headaches. There's going to be growing pains. And how you manage that is going to determine what kind of person or friend you are. Yeah, there's contracts. But is there decency here? Is there actual love and decency? Or is it just going to be, no, fuck this. You signed a contract. Listen, recently there was an NFL player, and I can't remember his name right now because I don't remember any NFL player's name, really, who tore his Achilles like a couple weeks ago. Tore his Achilles at home working out. And every asshole on the planet came out, right? Because I forgot who was the team. I can't remember who he plays for. Essentially, the contract might be voided. $13 million might be voided because he got injured not on team grounds, but on his grounds. Now, mind you, the NFL Players Association advised against them going to OTAs because of COVID. Understandable. 2, let's be clear. Most NFL players don't live in the cities that they play for. That's just a fact. Some of them do, some don't. So these OTAs, so when you're working out, you can't just not work out. You have to work out, right? Because you're playing a sport at the highest level. You have to be one of the best athletes in the world to play NFL football. And if you're an offensive lineman, I think he might be an offensive lineman, I think, it's even more important because you're also maintaining weight. You know what I mean? When you're like a wide receiver, I'm not saying that you don't have to maintain weight. What I am saying, though, is that it's a little bit easier when your metabolism does whatever you want it to do. And you hit a weight that this is just going to be the person you are. When you're big, such as me, who has dealt with this shit, well, your metabolism doesn't work that way. So you have to be really exact with your fucking diet and with working out and all that shit. It's all important. You have to be maintaining that year round. You can't just take a summer off. That's what Shaq used to do, and he used to come in basketball. He used to come in out of shape. That's why the other players who are not heavy don't ever come in out of shape. You know what I mean? James Harden is prone to thickness. There are players who are prone to thickness, and there are players who are just not. You know what I mean? You could just tell the way. Kevin Durant, I'm sure Kevin Durant could eat 5 pizzas a day and wouldn't gain a fucking pound. I promise you that. I guarantee you that. Giannis was probably something similar. He probably had to really develop a crazy diet to get himself the way he is now. But guys like Shaq or Joel Embiid, these guys, they're thick. They're naturally heavy. So an offensive lineman is naturally going to be heavy. You know what I mean? That guy is going to have to be working out constantly on his own. He's going to have to be maintaining his own diet. So for them to avoid the contract is fucked up. It's just fucked up. That's the decency part. The decency part is fucked up. But then you have people who, oh, but the contract and you're not supposed to work off for the team. Yeah, those are the facts. We get it. Okay, cool. Okay, those are the facts. Sure. But is there fucking human decency? That's the question. Is there any decency? And between these three gentlemen, is there loyalty? Like, I just, hearing Joe talk on that episode, essentially shitting, just putting all the business out there, shitting on Maul, shitting on Rory. Him and Maul apparently have been friends for 20 plus years. But like for me, from my standpoint, if I heard this episode, I just throw that friendship. Maul is different. He's a calm person. I'm not a calm person. You know what I mean? I'm not a calm person. I'm confrontational. I'm a confrontational person. So if you say some shit, the shit that Joe was saying, the phone call is going to be violent. You know what I mean? It's going to be a violent phone call. I don't give a fuck who you are, Joe. It's going to be violent. You're talking wild. Who the fuck do you think you are? I can't go get a check? Do you think, and because I agree with Maul here, and a lot of people, again, living vicariously, are going to say, oh, Maul's only saying that because he don't make that much money. Shut your dumb ass up for 1 second. For one moment, I want you to take a step back, right, and wonder if, A, money being the sole objective that you have on this planet is healthy or makes any fucking sense. And B, if you were, wait, what was the second point? I'm sorry. And B, if you can believe that there are people on this planet who don't view money as the only thing. Listen, over the last year, I had come doing a lot of mental health work, right? Come to a point where I started thinking about money, right? Because I'm used to doing this ladder thing, climbing this ladder. And the truth of the matter is, I probably have never cared that much about money, but there is a number. There's a number that I'm like, if I can get to this number annually, I can live the life I want to live, which is a modest life, surrounded by nature, space for my son, a place where I can be happy and calm. And that's it, peaceful. That's all I need. That's all I need. Living a career, doing a career that gives me peace, right? Now, maybe I'm not passionate about, but maybe I find peace in it, right? That's all I've ever asked for. I mean, if you ever watched Office Space, that's kind of the point of Office Space, right? It's a funny way to do it, but that's the point of it. Can I find peace and make this amount of money and be happy? Yep, this is the amount of money I can make. You know, I used to think about wanting to be a rapper. I've always wanted to be a rapper my whole life, right? And I still do. You know, I still want to rap and make music and write. But I had realized long ago, right, that I never would feel comfortable being on a stage. I would never feel comfortable being on a stage. And when I think about those things, I think about, okay, when you look at like someone like Kanye West, do you ever wonder why we look at his mental health like a vacuum? You know, Kanye's wilding again. Without considering all the things that have gone into this, or ever considering that the life he lives is really, really fucking unnatural, and that most people probably can't live that life. How Jay-Z lives that life, and mind you, we don't know the details of Jay-Z's life. You could find out in a week from now he's eating kids or some shit like that, and it'd be like, well, we didn't know anything about him actually. How he's managed to stay so private is really fucking impressive, because Kanye is just a regular person put into a situation that he could never be prepared for. That level of fame, that level of adoration, that level of just women chucking themselves at you, drugs, alcohol flowing around you constantly 24/7. Yes, men, that's another drug. Yes, men in your ear, yesing you to death. That's a drug. That's a drug. You're not given a real life. You're not understanding life on a real level. You're understanding a fantasy life that you're living until the money's gone. And then when that's gone, what happens next? Well, you see what happens next to a lot of other people. You know what I mean? How it falls apart from that point forward. These are not natural lives. And I knew that pretty early. You can't put me in those situations. As someone who just dealt with an eating disorder, you can't put me in a situation where you're going to give me women 24/7 or alcohol flowing around me. And I don't think I'd ever do drugs necessarily. It's never been my thing. But yeah, am I going to drink a lot? Yeah. Am I going to indulge in women? Sure. Fuck yes, for sure. Without a question. Without a fucking question. You know what I mean? So when you're talking about these things, oh, well, Ball don't make money. That's why. Stop. I actually do believe Maul when he says what he says. I don't give a fuck about the money. I don't care about that. Yeah, no, you know what? I believe it because I am the same way. I can relate to that. I do care about, I wouldn't go as far as he said. I do care about money, sure, because you need money to do things. If you have kids, money is important. Money is important to leave them a life, not even for today, but just to leave them a life that's like one day when I'm dead, you have a house. This is your house, and this is your land, and this is your shit right here. This is what I've left you behind. Yeah, money is important to do those things, to build some sort of generational wealth, right? But generational wealth doesn't mean billions and millions of dollars. It just means, hey, here's a house, here's land. This is what I own. Now you build on this, right? I understand what he's saying when he says that. At the end of the day, it's us. And I used to always have, I remember working at Sears back in the day. And if you listen to this podcast, if you watch any of the short videos, you know some of my Sears stories, which are hilarious. And there was this guy there. This guy made me hate every Bob on the planet. It made me realize that there is no good Bobs. There's good Roberts, but if you met someone named Bob, that is not a good person, probably. There was this guy named Bob. He was a manager, and he used to walk around like some real big shit in Sears. He used to talk real big, and used to just be disrespectful, demeaning, disrespectful. You know what I mean? We're 18-year-old kids, and you're 40, and you're talking to us like we're not going to get the opportunity to learn things or to grow or to build, like whatever. And I remember thinking at that time, Bob, I remember thinking at that time to myself, I didn't say this to Bob, and I should have. In here, you control my life here. In this space, not even my life, but you control my actions in this space. But out there, you don't control dick about me. Out there, you're just a guy, and I'm just a guy. And I'm a guy who could beat the shit out of you, probably. But maybe Bob can fight. Who knows? Maybe Bob will fuck me up. I don't know. Sears, roll buck, go buck. You never know. I'm going to fuck Bob up, though. Out there. And I used to carry this chip on my shoulder, right? Especially now with basketball, because I have body image issues, which I'll talk to later, maybe talk about later. And a lot of times I find myself, you're at the gym and you're seeing people who are working out. Everyone is ripped. And I've had this conversation with people at the gym. The gym is a funny place when you look around and you see only skinny people or only in shape people. And I'm like the only fat person in the gym at times. And it's funny. It's a funny dynamic because it's like we're supposed to be – fat people go to the gym to lose weight, makes sense, but that's the place that they feel the least comfortable because everyone around them makes them feel uncomfortable, right? So here I am at the gym, but there's this thought in my head because I'm good at basketball that I'm like, yeah, you know what? You got muscles and you might be good looking, whatever, but I'll fucking trash you at basketball. And that gives me peace. That gives me like a type of peace. You know what I mean? So when you're talking about this stuff, when all of this is gone, when you strip all of it away, what kind of person were you at the end of the day? Did you treat people with decency? Were you loyal? Right? And I kind of agree with Maul with that. Is there respect here still? Because you're talking fly. You're talking because and the dynamic between us is that this is the Joe Budden podcast. So this is the Joe Budden property, and I am just an employee for the property. That's fine within this scope. That might be true, but then because of how big it's gotten and because of the amount of fans, all of these people in the world look at Joe as if Joe is above Maul in life, in just real life. Joe is better than Maul. Joe owns Maul. No, strip all that away. What is Joe and who is Maul? Who are these people? That's the only thing that fucking matters here. That's the only question that there is. Fuck the podcast. Listen, the podcast isn't going to be the same. You know what I mean? I haven't watched it with these two new guys, Ice and Ish or whatever their name is. I haven't watched it with them. Again, I didn't really watch the podcast that much, but I do think that, yes, Joe was the, you know, when I do my podcast, I rant. This is why I see myself in Joe, or see Joe in me, whatever. I rant a lot. And because Joe being one of the first early emo, like super emo rappers, you know what I mean, made me feel comfortable being also an emo rapper. Um, so I see things of me and Joe and whatever, right? This ranting, you know what I mean? And I'm not going to say I see myself as a talent, but I know that when I do podcasts with, you see me do podcasts with Vic or Christian or Fred, the worst possible situation is me having to host. That's not a good version of the podcast. The best version of the podcast is having a third party be the host and letting us talk it out. You know what I mean? So these three guys, what they essentially had was they brought in the fourth guy, which was, what's his name? Parks, who was essentially just, I mean, well, I will say he did speak up on the podcast with Rory and Maul, but on that episode that went up yesterday, I mean, you're just talking fly. You know what I mean? Just talking like, again, you're talking on this podcast. You're emboldened by this podcast, but in real life, are we homies? Would you talk about me like this in real life if we're homies? Then we can't be homies. You know what I mean? We can't be friends. How could we? If I talk fly shit about one of my homies here on this podcast, and I saw them later and expected them to be, would I expect them to be cool? No. I'd expect them to confront me. Yo, what the fuck? Because after all of it, yo, are you a man? And I'm a man. Was it worth it? Then now we got to fight, or now we have to confront each other about this shit. Was that worth it to you to be talking like this? I don't know. I don't know. I just, it makes me question things. Like when I see this shit, you know what I mean? Because again, you can see, yeah, it's the Joe Budden property. Sure. It's the Joe Budden podcast. Sure. I got it. I get it. I understand that. Right. And he is the talent. You can say, fine, that's fine. Maul and Rory did bring something though, because I don't want to listen to 3 hours of Joe just yelling bullshit, talking in circles, because that's what he does. Listen, Joe is a good communicator, and he's a smart dude, in my opinion, regardless of what you think. I understand that he also likes to appear like he's a lot smarter than he is. He has that in him as well, but he is a smart dude. He is. He's a logical dude. He reminds me of myself. I think I'm a smart person. Maybe I'm dumb as shit. I don't know. But when I'm watching that podcast with those two, this is gaslighting. This is why I learned, oh, this is the action of gaslighting is happening here. Because he's too smart to not know the difference. To not act like he doesn't understand what these dudes are saying. To act like he don't fucking get it. And I'm guilty of doing that. Arguing semantics. Arguing semantics to prove a point. Fuck your semantics for a second. Is there respect here? That's all. That's all I'm asking you. Is there respect? Is there transparency? Is all this? And you're here arguing, you're here harping on the podcast should have stopped thing. Okay, Maul's wrong. That's it. And one thing that Rory kept saying that I do agree with, and I'm not even a big fan of Rory really. Rory kept saying, hey, we just went about this the wrong way. And it's true. That's all. At the end of the day, y'all are arguing and debating semantics, and it's all bullshit. This is how you felt. This is how you felt. This is how you felt. Everything we did in that time was wrong to handle this. And now we should handle it. Well, it's apparently not handled. Whatever happened after that is not handled. Because they signed a contract. Joe was going to hold him to that contract. And yeah, that's his legal right. Sure. We want to act like this justice system, we act like the justice system in this country is morally correct and morally just. It's wild watching the same fucking people sit here and argue for Black lives, right? Argue against the right and conservative view, and fucking racists who were like, oh, well, when Breonna Taylor died, her husband shot at the cops, so she was a sacrifice, right? So you would argue against that and against the bullshit logic of this justice system, because what's right is right and what's wrong is wrong, and that's it. Fuck what's legal for 1 second. Fuck legality. Fuck the law. Fuck this shit. Is this right? That one person died she didn't shoot the gun, so she should not have died. That's it. What's right is right. What's wrong is wrong. But then you'll see those same fucking people vacillate from there to, well, they signed a contract. So, but no, fuck that contract for 1 second. You're watching the show because you're watching the interactions of three homies. But behind the scenes, they're not acting like three homies. They're acting like three business associates, apparently. That's fake then. That's a fraud shit. That should bother you. That should bother you. Your reaction shouldn't be, well, he signed it. Fuck the contract for 1 second, man. Fuck that. Fuck that. Because on one hand, Joe was talking, you don't have to ask around. I do business the right way. Everyone who's ever done business with me, I pay them. I'm generous. Blah, 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 blah. Cool. Is that in the contract that you're generous? If they have questions about your generosity, because essentially you're saying, I'm generous, you don't have to question it. What you're really saying is, don't fucking question me. I'm generous. Well, what if I don't agree with your generosity, though? What if I don't think you're generous? So I can't question the contract? I can't question the business behind this? Oh, you signed the contract, so that's it, huh? So that's it. So what's actually happening is you're taking it personal. You're bothered by the fact that I'm saying, because there's insinuations. You're bothered by these insinuations. Joe, your whole career is insinuations. You've been insinuated upon your entire career, and that eats you alive. And I've heard you talk about mental health for sure. I've heard you talk about it, and I've heard you take this stance as if you're this mental health advocate, but watching you here, that don't look to me like somebody who's been in therapy. Listen, there's boundaries, sure. You talked about, but you threw that word yesterday on that podcast around boundaries. Boundaries are important, facts. Putting boundaries on friendships, important, without a question. If somebody does something to you that you don't agree with or something that bothers you, it's completely okay to put a boundary up. You know what I mean? It's completely okay to put a boundary up. And try to communicate it as directly as possible with no anger, no feelings. This is how I feel. This is what happened. That's it. Boundary. Boom. We're done. That's it. It's the end. Don't have to be no beef, no smoke. That's it. This is just what happened. This is just now the boundary. That's cool. It's okay to be that way. But you can't go from something as logical and as objective as a boundary, because that's what that is. A boundary is something that is an objective thing. You know what I mean? It's an objective thing and a thing based on feelings. You've affected my feelings, so now I have to objectively take some space away from you, and there's going to be this between us, this logic between us that can't be broken down because you've hurt my feelings somehow. You know what I mean? And that's a logical decision where you can't make that and talk about feelings at the same time. And you can't vacillate when you want to talk about feelings and business and experience and all this, and then say contracts and this. Do you care about contracts or you don't care about contracts? Because what it sounds like is you only care about contracts when someone's hurt your feelings. That's the truth. When someone's violated your feelings, you give a fuck about contracts. But if you're in charge, you don't give a shit about contracts, right? And you're going to find ways out of contracts. Your whole life is finding ways out of contracts, which you did with Slaughterhouse. You admitted it on the podcast. I retired to get out of the contract, right? The same thing that Prince did, because there was something wrong with it, because your feelings, because the chemistry wasn't there. Chemistry is not, chemistry between people, chemistry between people is subjective. That is a belief system. That's not factual. You can't take the chemistry between two people and measure it in a lab or put it under a microscope. That's assumed. That is something that is not tangible. That's abstract. So you're saying that the chemistry is off and the energy is off. This is feelings. This is feelings. And in your mind, you're saying this can't work this way, so I'm going to get out of this contract. Which one is it? Human beings, the problem is with contracts and all of this, is human beings, this concept that we are just cerebral, that people are like, no, I don't operate on feelings, is bullshit. This is bullshit. Sure, some people are better at putting their feelings to the side and making these objective decisions and cerebral decisions. Some people aren't. It's really just it's a spectrum of how you can or cannot manage your emotions. That's what it is. It's how you can or can't measure your emotions. But ultimately behind that, there are feelings and there are emotions. There always will be. We are not human beings without feelings and emotions. Without feelings and emotions, you're a sociopath or you're a serial killer. Yeah. Yeah, and even those sociopaths really are victims of feelings that happened when they were kids and caused a trauma in them, and now they have separated themselves from their own humanity. Essentially, is kind of what happens to them. Everything is feelings. When you quit a job, you quit feelings. There are going to be feelings involved. If you quit on good terms, you give your 2 weeks in, you're going to miss the place. No one ever just leaves and is like, oh, I don't feel anything right now. How don't you? Either you feel like, man, wow, I'm going to miss these people, or I'm going to miss this place, or I'm going to miss, or I appreciate the opportunities that I got from here. And now there's a new beginning and there's new start and there's optimism, a feeling. There's always going to be feelings. We're human. So you can't separate feelings from business. It doesn't exist. That doesn't exist. And Joe, your history tells us that. You know what I mean? I hate to bring up the Charlemagne thing because, yeah, everyone's talking about Charlemagne predicted this years ago. Yeah, unfortunately, he did. Charlemagne did. Rosenberg on Hot 97 did the same exact thing. Him and Ebro been beef, whatever. He was on that show and did the thing that Joe does, which is get thrown off the show or storm off the show, whatever you want to call it. He's done that multiple times. I mean, he was on a press run doing that with them, and he did it with this dude who's in jail, Taxstone, which is one of the funniest moments I've ever seen in my life. Because you're there with your weird feelings, and it's no one can, because you're so fucking up and down. You're probably bipolar, I would guess. I'm bipolar too, where sometimes you show up and you're just closed off. Seen you do this in a million interviews, can't understand. And then you bring Kevin Samuels on, but that's a whole other fucking story. I don't even want to, you want to talk about toxicity. Listen, I'm not going to talk about Kevin Samuels here. Maybe I'll save this for another podcast. It's hard because there are so many people who love Kevin Samuels that I'd probably be in the minority and completely get ousted and completely shitted on for whatever. But if you need someone to tell you how to be a man, then you really need to consider who the fuck you are. You know what I mean? You need to consider who you are. You really need to review who you are as a person. We spend more time looking outside for advice than looking inside for our own moral compass to adjust it. What is wrong and what is right? And these weird ass games and this weird ass shit. You know what I mean? And listen, let me be honest about something. I never have watched the Kevin Samuels episode. I know Kevin Samuels for one thing, and that's roasting that one chick who said she wanted a 6-figure or a 7-figure man. And this dude just went ham on her. And it's like, there are, at the basis of some of the things he was saying, sure, there's some truth to them. Right. Really, from my perspective, looking at her, I was kind of more like just another victim of someone who thinks that money is the only thing that brings value to people, that money is the only thing that brings value to people. Do you have a 7-figure salary? That's the only way, huh? You can't have a 7-figure fucking heart or a 7-figure mind or something like that. I'm not saying that you have to date broke people, right? I'm going off on a tangent. I'm not saying go date broke people, that you should want to date somebody who can't provide for you. I'm not saying that. 7 figures is not the only type of money that can provide for you. And that 7-figure person might be shorted in heart and in mind, a la Kevin Samuels. That's why they'll look at you like you ain't shit, because money is value to all of these people, and we can't fucking get away from that. We can't get away from how much value we think money assigns us. It doesn't assign us value. It doesn't assign your content of character. Shit, your character is not money based. It's nothing with money. And I'm not really a religious person. I have my own faith and my own belief system. And the Bible I know has been used to essentially ruin the world in a lot of ways. But there is good logic in the Bible. And this is why money is the root of all evil. Because once you start assigning value to earning potential, the value of a human being based on what they can earn, no wonder we treat disabled people like shit. No wonder we treat old people like shit. No wonder we treat people on welfare like shit. No wonder we treat people in the poor neighborhoods like shit, because to us, their value is what they can earn. But if they can't earn, then they ain't shit. And that's present here. Contracts, and I'm the talent, and y'all are just, and your feelings. That's feelings based on how much money you feel like you can earn, and how much money you feel like they bring in. They don't bring enough, so you feel like you're over them. And they just want to know, hey, what's going on with this business? And listen, I don't know the background. Let's be clear. I don't know the background. This is based off of what I've seen Joe saying. And I will say this one thing about Joe, and this is a good thing, because I'm guilty of this too. Where you get, even though Joe is shitting on them, but he doesn't let off details. right? He's not letting off details because I think ultimately he doesn't want to, because in my mind, and I don't know, I could be wrong. Maybe I'm caping for him a little bit. That I think that he's not letting off details because he wants people to blame him. Blame him. It's fine. I can't imagine any other world because the way you're talking makes you look like the bad guy. I haven't heard you say anything that I agree with. And I know there are people out there who agree with you because, again, they live vicariously through this life that you're living, even though they have nothing close to it. They'll never have anything close to that. But for them, well, yeah, you're right, man. Contract. They signed that contract. But you have never had any involvement with a fucking contract. What are you talking about? You don't do shit with contract. You don't know anything about contracts. When a human being signs a business contract, it's already fucked. That's an oxymoron. That don't make sense. That goes against our own fucking composition as human beings. But we don't make sense. We're human beings. We're human beings are complicated creatures. And once you assign value to things based on money and earning potential, we have lost all heart. We've lost all heart. That's what capitalism does. You lose heart. You look at social media and the things that they do to get you on there. Originally, it had a great intention. Things like Facebook had a great intention. Well, not really. It didn't have a great intention, but it was a nice idea until you find out that once the developers and all the business people in Facebook found out that there was a real world implication to what it felt like to post something and get likes, that it was a drug to us, that we were getting serotonin hits and dopamine hits by shit like that. And these are facts. I'm not speaking anything out of turn. You can look this up on your own. That we were getting these literal drug reactions to our interactions on Facebook and social media. Once that happened and they continue to alter the algorithms to essentially accentuate that, to exaggerate that feeling, that's when heart goes out of it. Because that's capitalism. How can you make the most money? Get more people on the platform. How can we get more people on the platform? Keep feeding them the drug. It's the same thing. It's the same thing. It's what we do. It's what we do as human beings. Once we think that money is the only way, that's why Joe Rogan has such a big... People listen to Joe Rogan or people listen to Elon Musk because they're rich and successful in this world, as opposed to just putting them in their proper place. If you knew Elon Musk's history, you wouldn't be so willing to listen to him or to view him as such a hero to you. He's not. He's no different than any other person who's trying to take advantage of regular people. No different. No different. He's no different. And Joe Rogan's the same way. It's what happens when you have a white dude with privilege who's never lived an unprivileged life. I talked about that. He had Jocko Willenick, and here they are talking about cops in the ghettos and blah, 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 blah. Y'all have never lived in a fucking ghetto. What are you talking about? How you can't even, you don't know what it's like to live in a ghetto. You don't know what it's like to be black in a ghetto. You don't know what it's like to be black on this planet or how to be the minority. You don't know what the fuck you're talking about. But we're going to listen to you. Yeah, that's the problem. We assign money. I mean, we assign value, people's value based on their earning. Joe, I'm sorry. We had a president that was based on that exact thing. Donald Trump, the literal appearance of value, the visage of money, with none of the things behind it that support that he is this billionaire, but he looks rich. So we assign value. This person must know something. He must be good at something. He must be smart. No, it really just means he was willing to fuck people over to get to the top. That's what it takes to make more money. That's what it takes to make the majority of money. It takes a certain level of, I don't give a fuck about anybody around me. And that's cool. Get your mail. I'm not trying to hate on that. If you're hungry for money, go do your thing. But don't ever lose the value of human beings. Don't ever think that the value of human beings is based on money. That's really the truth. When you're talking about, I treat the CEO of the company the same as I treat the janitor. That's really the point of that saying. Don't just say that and not understand what the point, the heart behind it is, the morality. It's that I'm saying that this person's value is no more than this person's value just because money. They're human beings. And that's ultimately it, how I feel about this. You know what I mean? Fuck these contracts. When I'm watching this, I'm thinking of my friends. You know what I mean? I'm thinking of my friends. And it bothers me because I have been guilty of some of the shit that Joe Budden does, and it bothers me that I could have ever been that way in the past and watch him be that way at 40 years old and think that's cool, and it's not. And it's not. So that's it. That's all I got. That's my thoughts on the Joe Budden shit. Everyone, you know the drill. Wash your hands. Stay safe. Black Lives Matter. Arrest the cops who killed Breonna Taylor. Stop Asian hate. Get vaccinated or stay the fuck away from me. Please. Please. No, but please get vaccinated. Please get vaccinated. I would like to have a social life, even though I don't even know what that's going to look like. But I would like to have a social life, or at least act like I have one. So that's it, everyone. Take care.
And sometimes I gotta cope. And sometimes